Hi, I'm Michael from Michael the Gathering, and this is How to Build Red-White Tokens. If you've been playing Best Standard in any capacity recently, you've been styled on by this deck at least once. Capacity for any deck to end turn 2 with 5 small creatures and a 4/4 and still have 4 cards left in their hand is really something that shouldn't be okay. And doubly so given that one of those 4 cards in hand will reliably be a Flamekin Zealot effect or just a Glorious Anthem. Red-White Tokens is what you might call a criticality deck. It's not quite aggro, it's not quite combo. What you have here is that very specific blend of just enough power in the format to kill one player just fast enough. It outperforms curve-out decks like Aggro and goes well under mid-range and control decks. Pending, of course, the Eternal Silver Bullet temporary lockdown, which this deck even has an answer for. I'll spare you the fighting around and get to the meat of the deck right away. Novice Inspector, Voldaren Epicure, Gleeful Demolition, and Knight-Errant of Eos. Now, what makes these cards so fantastic is if you draw them in your opening hand together, they are absolutely unstoppably powerful. They provide a bar that just is almost impossible for a deck to go over. But they are not the only important parts of the deck. A single 4/4 still dies to a 2-mana black removal spell, even if it did potentially draw you 2 cards. And 5 glorified 1/1s are not actually going to end the game as fast as you might think when other decks are putting out 2/4s and 4/4s to block. No, the important thing is that this all happens on turn 2, and then turn 3 has many options for you to turn that board presence into a game-ending alpha strike. What made the deck initially popular, and obvious to deck builders really, was War Leader's Call. But if you're shy on wildcards, you'll be happy to know it's not actually necessary. War Leader's Call is a nice card for slowly ending the game and just turning your overall token play into a more value-oriented game. But at this point, the deck has mutated into a form beyond that. Nowadays, the aggressive enchantment of choice is Case of the Gateway Express, being both a piece of removal for the Preacher of the Schisms or Topiary Stompers that are sitting in front of your creatures and stopping you from ending the game, and a buff for the half of your creature that you care about, that being the front half. Case is both cheaper and faster to come out, requiring less mana to cast, but more of a board presence to activate, which of course matches the goals of Boros tokens perfectly. Similarly, a lot of the punching power for actually ending the game comes from Imodane's Recruiter and Sanguine Evangelist, 2 fantastic cards that I absolutely don't see getting enough credit when people are talking about this deck. Sanguine Evangelist in particular has been appearing in white decks for some time, and people just haven't paid attention to it because it's a 2/1 for 3 mana. What could be so incredible about it? Well, it's actually a 2/1 and a flying 1/1, and while it doesn't have haste, it can be tapped for Convoke mana right away, which is incredibly important when you're using Knight-Errant of Eos for its actual purpose, which is not flooding the board on turn 2. Knight-Errant's real value in red-white tokens is providing fuel and consistency to the deck. Muldrifter is a card that ETBs and draws 2 cards, and it's so powerful that it's recognized as just an archetype of creatures by itself. Knight-Errant can be played for potentially 0 mana and then draw additional copies of itself off the top of the deck. And you don't even have to play it for 0 mana. Often the correct play is to play it for 2, tapping 3 of your creatures so that you can get an Imodane's Recruiter off the top of your deck. Because what that then allows you to do is play the Imodane's Recruiter and attack with your entire board immediately, ending the game. Redundancy is another huge part of what makes red-white tokens so powerful, which is why Warden of the Inner Sky is an absolute must craft. It's not just a card that grows in power as you tap down tokens that you can't get past a blocker. It also scries, which is, according to limited expert and YouTube star Seekovitz, 40% of a card. And believe me, when you're shoveling cards to the bottom of your deck because you just need to get a single piece of removal or an Imodane's Recruiter to end the game, that 1 mana 1/2 is going to feel like it's drawing a lot of cards for free. And of course, Resolute Reinforcements, the flash raise the alarm that can be ripped off the deck with a Knight-Errant of Eos. It's just a great card and is resistant to sorcery speed removal by allowing you to represent other cards during your opponent's turn. And speaking of redundancy, if you want more how to build, make sure to like and subscribe. I'm continuing to develop how to build, and I put out a new short every day covering all the rares and mythics that hit standard. Even a deck as one note and barely over the cusp of playability as red-white tokens has some room for creativity. Certainly, if you just really enjoy Anthem effects, you can play 4 copies of Case and 4 copies of War Leader's Call. But that's not going to be your best mileage. You're going to want to spend some deck slots on some utility picks. If you're lower in the ladder, I extremely highly recommend playing 2 or 3 Lunarch Veteran. The additional life that you get from playing so many tokens out onto the board is invaluable in a section of ladder that is so completely overrun with mono red. And as you raise up through the ladder, be sure to make space for at least 2 copies of Get Lost, the new 2-mana piece of removal that might give your opponents map tokens in return for their removed card, but incredibly importantly, not only removes defenders that are too big for even a fully charged case, but can destroy temporary lockdown, re-flooding your entire board and honestly threatening lethal more often than not. And if you're really spicy, you can target your own creatures and get 2 additional tokens that you can then either tap or feed to a Gleeful Demolition. It's legit. It is extremely legit. If you're low on wild cards, I'm also quite partial to the artifacts Yoshian Frontliner and Experimental Synthesizer. Both fantastic cards in their own right, just maybe not necessarily the best in slot cards for the deck. Although I know that there are some very high level players who will strenuously disagree with me on the subject of Yoshian Frontliner. Finally, because of the very fresh and new nature of the deck, I do have to call out some cards that are still showing up in lists that you absolutely should not be running. Do not craft Regal Unicorn. It's just a really tall creature that gets chump blocked forever. If you can get a Unicorn through to deal face damage, then you are going to kill your opponent with tokens anyway. Remember that your Knight-Errant of Eos are 4/4s in their own right and will kill a player without boosting. Similarly, Witchstalker Frenzy and Stoke the Flames are 2 more burn-oriented spells that you really don't need. Witchstalker Frenzy has been completely outmoded by Case of the Gateway Express because, realistically, if you can't remove something with Case of the Gateway Express, the rest of your situation needs fixing before onlining that card. And Stoke the Flames is really only useful for going over the top and dealing that last little bit of damage to an opponent's face. Again, a thing you should be able to do more effectively if the rest of your deck is in good shape. This video is being recorded right before a new set comes out, so I know that there's going to be some changes. I mean, we're about to get a red-white fast land. That's going to make this deck explode in popularity even more. If there have been any fantastic changes to the deck since recording, I'm not going to be offended. Leave them in a comment down below. And if you have a favorite deck that you want to jump to the front of the line of how to build, be sure to leave a comment down there too. Try not to be too salty when this entire deck rotates. G'day and good laddering.